I am Eliyahu Ben Zion. I have lived in New York City since my youth. Before that, I was raised as a rabbi in the Holy Land of Israel. Teaching God's laws and guiding people was my duty. The Talmud and Torah were my guides, the foundation of my life. My family too was shaped by these beliefs. But everything changed 6 years ago, on December 21st, 2018. It was Shabbat, and my home was peaceful and calm. My blindness, which I had lived with for years, had drawn me closer to God's teachings. I felt my prayers through my hands, repeating every word as it resonated within me. That evening, the light of the Shabbat candles filled me with peace. But in a moment of carelessness, I accidentally knocked over one of the candles. It fell, igniting the tablecloth. Panicked, I tried to act, but due to my blindness, I wasn't aware of what I was doing. Instead of extinguishing the fire, I inadvertently spread it further. Smoke filled the house. Every breath poisoned me more. My chest tightened, and my heart suddenly felt as though it was being crushed. The last thing I remember was whispering a prayer to God, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, and then everything went dark. This wasn't just physical darkness. It was a void pulling my soul into the unknown. It was a darkness unlike my blindness, deeper, colder, and utterly silent. At that moment, I realized my journey had just begun. After losing consciousness, I found myself in a vast, undefined space. The physical blindness I knew was familiar, but this darkness was entirely different. It pierced my soul like a knife, cold and silent. I couldn't tell up from down. Was there ground beneath my feet, or was I falling? I wasn't sure. Shadows flitted about, moving endlessly. I could sense them approaching, but I couldn't discern who or what they were. Soon, the space changed. The grey darkness slowly turned red. This colour awakened a sense of danger within me. The heat rose and breathing became more difficult. The shadows were no longer vague entities. I could see them more clearly. They had no faces, yet their whispered voices filled the air. Each word echoed in my mind like a ripple. I couldn't understand their exact meanings, but they carried an overwhelming sense of anger and disappointment. Suddenly I noticed my clothes were in tatters. I was left completely exposed, vulnerable and defenseless. This realization terrified me even more, as I had no idea where this place would lead or what I would face. I was forced to walk forward, as if an unseen force was pushing or pulling me. I tried to resist, but it was futile. My feet moved against my will. Ahead of me stood massive, ominous doors. Each bore different inscriptions: Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, and others. The doors vibrated menacingly, as though charged with energy from within. Behind each door lay darkness and flames. But what terrified me most was that I stopped abruptly before the door labeled Children of Israel. I was being pulled toward the door. I struggled with all my might, but I couldn't move. The door opened on its own, and the deep darkness engulfed me. The sounds beyond the door filled me with dread, screams, groans, wails. These were human voices, but their pain was beyond description. As I passed through the door, a wave of heat engulfed my entire being. A deep ache settled in my soul. It felt as though with every step, a piece of me was being torn away. The echo of the pain reverberated through my body and spirit. I finally understood where I was. This was hell, and my journey had only just begun. Beyond the door, a terrifying sight appeared before me. A vast, bottomless valley stretched out. The screams rising from it pierced my soul. and the groans echoed in my ears. Those trapped here were my kin. Some I seemed to recognize, while others were only faintly familiar. But all bore faces of profound regret and helplessness. I saw souls writhing across the valley. Some crawled on hands and knees. With every step, flames erupted from the ground, burning their bodies. Their flesh melted but never vanished. Others were crushed beneath enormous stones. I wanted to help them, but then I looked at my own hands. They too were burning, my skin cracking and succumbing to the flames. I could do nothing but watch. As I moved forward, the valley became even more horrifying. Massive burning pillars rose in the depths. These pillars symbolized the powers and wealth they had wielded in life. They stood amidst them, stripped of any authority. Figures I had heard of in history appeared. One was from the Rothschild family, bankers, diamond merchants, the wealthy. They were the ones who prioritized greed over the well-being of their people. One approached me, eyes hollow and surrounded by flames. Their voice was hoarse and trembling. We were God's people, but we took His grace for granted. We saw ourselves as superior. Instead of helping our people, we took pride in our wealth. Now see, God's justice is real. It wasn't just the wealthy. Religious leaders who had abused their power, false prophets, and corrupt authorities were among them. Rabbis in their robes burned amidst the flames, punished for leading people away from God. The sight horrified me, and then I realized I was one of them. A wave of fire engulfed me. My body burned but wouldn't perish. The pain was unbearable, echoing in every cell, tearing my soul apart. At that moment I understood. No matter how devout I had been, I had rejected Jesus and ignored God's plan of salvation. This shame and regret weighed heavier than the physical pain. As I went deeper, more screaming souls appeared. Each cried out in regret, "We ignored the Messiah. We rejected Him, and now we perish here. Oh, if only we could return." At the end of the valley, I reached the edge of a cliff. Beyond the abyss lay an even darker depth. The screams and wails rising from there were more terrifying than any I had heard before. These voices belonged to those who had lost all hope. I looked at the walls of the valley and saw the faces of souls who had violated God's laws and misled their people. Their eyes locked onto mine as if accusing me. Amid this endless agony, something stirred deep within my soul. There had to be a reason for all of this. Was I also condemned to this eternity? Or was there still a way to redemption? The answer lay hidden in the continuation of this harrowing journey. As I descended deeper into hell, the environment became increasingly unbearable. Here, the torment was not only physical, but also a deep shame and regret that shook the soul. Every scream, every moan was an echo of the mistakes these people had made on earth. This time, I encountered not only Jews who had rejected the Messiah, but also those who had manipulated their faith to mislead others. A figure approached me. He wore a tattered, almost burnt rabbi's robe. His face appeared melted, with dark voids where his eyes should have been. He must have once guided people to God, but now he was just a shadow. His voice, though cracked, still bore traces of authority. "We are those who scorned God's grace on earth. We saw ourselves as superior, refused to lead our people, and denied the Messiah. Look at what we face now." His words struck a deep chord within me. They were not just directed at him, but also at me. For years I had rejected the Messiah and led my people to cling strictly to traditions and laws. But what if that wasn't enough? What if I had been wrong all along? Suppressed questions I had avoided my entire life began to surface. The figure extended his hand toward me. My eyes were drawn to his fingers. Each was engulfed in flames, yet did not burn away, as if symbolizing his sins. He withdrew his hand and looked at me again. You are like us. The pride in your heart kept you from hearing God's true call. We sanctified the laws, but forgot our souls. We ignored the Messiah, and now here we are. His words pierced my soul like an arrow. At that moment, my inner reckoning began. For years, I had mocked anything spoken about the Messiah. I realized my blindness was not just physical, but spiritual. My heart had been blind too. I had refused to understand God's plan, hiding behind my pride. I fell to my knees. Tears seemed to stream from my eyes, though even tears vanished in this place. With deep regret, I whispered, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. But this time, even this prayer felt insufficient. The figures around me began to fade one by one. Their screams still echoed, but all I felt was the emptiness within myself. All the years I believed I deserved God's love were an illusion. I collapsed entirely, stripped of pride, left with only profound remorse. As I lay there, utterly spent, a light appeared in the depths of the darkness. Even in this horrific place, it carried warmth to my heart. Was this God's final call to me, or a last fragment of mercy? Hell's darkness had consumed all my hopes. Kneeling on the ground, utterly broken, I believed everything was over. But at that moment, a light pierced through the darkness. It touched not just my eyes, but also my soul, a warm, comforting, and redemptive light. Gathering my courage, I lifted my head and saw the source of the light. Within the light was a figure unlike anything I'd ever seen. His face was both judging and full of compassion. He seemed to see everything. My sins, my mistakes, my regrets. This figure was Jesus. Even without knowing who he was, my soul recognized his holiness. Jesus approached me and spoke in the most beautiful voice I had ever heard. I see the goodness in your heart, Eliyahu. Your deeds have brought salvation to many families. Your prayers and help have strengthened their faith. Yet you have suffered here for rejecting me and ignoring God's plan. But grace is in my hands. I forgive you because you still carry light within you. When you return, you must accept this truth and understand God's salvation. Jesus then showed me the good I had done in my life and its outcomes. He reminded me of a Christian family who once needed my help. Through my material and spiritual support, I had helped them overcome their struggles. My small acts of kindness had helped their children continue attending church, playing an essential role in God's plan. These memories proved that I was part of God's love. Jesus' voice echoed again. The light within you has not faded, but you could not see it before. When you return, recognize this grace and do not turn away from the truth. His words stirred profound emotions in my soul. At that moment, I began to understand that Jesus was not only sent for the Jewish people, but for all humanity. The light in the darkness reconnected me to life. Suddenly, I opened my eyes. I felt air filling my lungs again, though I could still hear faint echoes of hell. I was in my bed surrounded by medics. I had survived, but something within me had changed. However, after waking, that transformation began to fade over time. As time passed, I tried to suppress what I had experienced. The darkness of hell, the light of Jesus, and his words remained etched in my mind, but my old habits and the deep roots of my faith still held me tightly. I tried to rationalize it by telling myself maybe it was just a hallucination caused by the fear of death. I questioned what I had seen and even tried to forget it. I attempted to return to my old prayers and daily rituals, yet I felt something had fundamentally changed within me. This feeling gnawed at me, disturbing my peace more and more each day. Jesus' words continued to echo in my heart. Know the truth and do not turn away again. One day, while trying to fully immerse myself in my routine and forget what I had experienced, something unexpected happened. It was an ordinary evening when suddenly the darkness I had grown accustomed to through my blindness shattered. It was as if a veil had been lifted from my eyes. The light before me not only pierced through my physical blindness, but also tore apart the darkness that had gripped my soul. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In my living room, for the first time in years, I saw light. My hands trembled. My eyes had reopened to the world. But this was not just a physical miracle. Directly in front of me, like an echo of the light I'd seen in hell, I saw the silhouette of Jesus. His eyes met mine, not in judgment, but as a reminder. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much I resisted, I could no longer deny the truth. He had offered me a path to salvation. The healing of my blindness was not merely a physical transformation, but a symbol of a spiritual awakening. You've taken the first step toward me, but you're still hesitant, Jesus said. His voice echoed in my ears, yet resonated deeply within me. This is a sign for you. When you return, proclaim the truth. Do not turn away again. With these words, his silhouette slowly faded, leaving me alone in the room. But the miracle in my eyes sealed the truth in my heart. I could no longer deny Jesus. Ignoring his grace and call would mean abandoning my soul to darkness. After this event, I not only began to question my old faith, but also understood that I needed to embark on a new journey. The journey that began as a blind man had now brought me both physical and spiritual light. The opening of my eyes was not just a miracle, but the beginning of a new chapter in my soul. From that day forward, I knew I could never be the same again. Leaving behind my past pride, stubbornness, and rejection of the Messiah, I stepped onto a new path. I accepted Jesus as my Savior and felt the peace that came with it in my heart. I shared my experiences with my family and grandchildren. At first they were surprised, and some even approached with skepticism. However, as they witnessed my spiritual peace and transformation, something began to shift in their hearts as well. I patiently worked to help them find the right path too. This journey was not just an end for me, but also a new beginning. Through God's grace, I left behind my past mistakes and shaped my future with a new light. I now understood that the light following every darkness symbolizes the truth to which God calls us.